Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Are you enjoying the Arthur Findlay College Day today?
Yes.
We're going to enjoy it a little bit more again now, because with us we have a lady who is a wonderful ambassador for spiritualism, worked all over the world in many different places, and Vice President Spiritual of the Spiritualist National Union, a tutor here at the Arthur Findlay College, and a Minister of the Spiritualist National Union. Ladies and gentlemen, Minister Judith Seaman is here for you this afternoon. Welcome, Judith. And we're going to have a tutorial.
No, lecture.
Lecture. Let's try again. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a lecture this afternoon on the religion of spiritualism. Thank you. You're welcome.
Before we look at the religion of spiritualism, we, I suppose, really need to just briefly look at how it all came into being. Because we talk about modern spiritualism starting on the 31st of March 1848, and in fact we celebrate Eidsvoll Day each year as the anniversary of the birth of modern spiritualism. We kind of need to look a little bit further back, because if we were to go back perhaps right into 2,000 years ago and look at what was happening sort of round about the time during that time that moved forward into the birth of Christianity, originated by the apostles of the man that is named as being called Jesus, the spiritual teacher. The early Christian religion, as written in Paul's epistle to the Corinthians in the Bible, talks about the early Christian services. And he talks about various elements within those services. And he talks about a doctrine, which would be like a prayer. He talks about psalms, which would be the equivalent of our hymns. And he talks about speaking in tongues, which would be the equivalent of our trans-speaking. And until about 60 years ago, our speakers in our services were trans-speakers. And he talks about a revelation with interpretation. That's pretty much what our mediumship is. So it would seem to me, really, that they were doing it then, all those years ago. But of course, something happened about 300 odd AD, which was something called the Council of Nicaea, where men got together and decided there was a great deal of power in being able to control religion. And so they made an edict that mediumship was now the work of the devil. And mediums thereafter were destroyed, put to death, prosecuted, wherever you look throughout history, for many, many years. What are called the Dark Ages. We need to think, did the spirit world just go to sleep for all that time? Do you think so?
No.
Certainly there were people who were still mediums, but they kept it quiet, because in fear, if they were accused of witchcraft, they would be put through the ducking stool. If they survived the ducking stool, they were declared a witch and burnt at the stake. So it wasn't a very good idea, because either which way you were going to be put to death. So it was kept very quiet. And so the knowledge and teachings of mediumship and the understanding of the spirit world began to disappear. But throughout as many researchers as we can trace, the spirit world still came knocking. And one such event happened in Russia, South America, Australia, South Africa. There are records of the phenomena taking place, the equivalent of what took place in Eidsvoll in 1848. But on each occasion, people were afraid to be called witches, so they pretended away, asked it to stop, insisted that the phenomena stop. And one took place not all that long before Hydesville. Just up the road in East Anglia is a place called Epworth, which was the rectory of the Reverend Samuel Wesley, forebear of John Wesley, who started the Wesleyan movement. And in the house there were 2 young teenage girls, and they had raps, just like the phenomena in Hydesville. So we have to remember that whilst this is not the religion of spiritualism, we must remember that the spirit world never ever stopped communicating, never ever tried to sort of say, well, we won't bother anymore. And I think there's a very good reason for that. If you were suddenly transported to the other side of the world, say Australia, would you want to let your loved ones know that you were safe, that you were alright? Can you imagine the frustration of the people in the spirit world when their door was closed in their face? How would you have felt? Not nice, is it? But they still wanted to communicate. So up the road at Hepworth, it happened. But they turned them away, just like all the others. And sometimes, and I say this in all good and pleasant, the Wesleyans might have been the spiritualists if things had been different, if that family had welcomed them. However, it wasn't really that much different at Hydesville in 1848. And this is not made much play of, really, but it's important to me. Yes, there was the raps with Margaret and Catherine, the daughters. And Mrs. Fox got very concerned for her daughters when all the public started coming to the little cottage where these things had happened. So she took her 2 girls and moved to Rochester to stay with her other daughter, Leah, who is not so much spoken of. She thought she would move away from the phenomena because they believed it was to do with the house and the peddler who had been murdered there, who was communicating. And so she thought if they moved away, they would be away from the phenomena. Didn't happen. The raps went with the girls because the girls were mediums. So the communication went with them. Okay, it was a different communicator, but when they moved to Rochester, it continued. And so the spirit world said to the Fox family, we would like you to go public and take this out to the world. We've been waiting so long. And Mrs. Fox said, no. And she said, please go away and leave us alone. And they did. And that could have been the end of that. What happened next? They missed their spirit friends. They felt bereft without them. So with a little bit of persuasion by a gentleman, friend of the family, Mrs. Fox agreed that they would ask them to come back and that her girls would go public. In other words, they stood up and were ready to be countered against what they knew was going to be tremendous opposition. And let's face it, we spiritualists have very much had to follow in their footsteps over many, many years with the opposition that there has been to spiritualism. But for me, that's when it really began. When some people were ready to stand up and be counted and become the ability for the spirit world to communicate with the earth once again. They must have had a party in the spirit world. But it cost those girls tremendous pain and suffering, as it has many other mediums throughout the ages. But the true birth of modern spiritualism came about because people were ready again to open those doors between the two worlds. The mediumship came from America to the United Kingdom, was brought over here. Traditionally, this is a story by a lady called Mrs. Hayden, but we do know that there were mediums working in this country prior to that. And we do know that Queen Victoria had her own medium, as well as the Gilly Brown. There were other mediums. One lady in this country, her family has a record from Queen Victoria thanking her mother for her mediumistic work for her. So there were mediums working here, but traditionally the story is Mrs. Hayden came across the pond, as they call it now, and started to promote mediumship in this country, against all the odds. Don't want to dwell, this is not a lecture on the history of spiritualism. I don't want to dwell too much, but needless to say that spiritualism in this country flourished between the two wars. I wonder why. Well, quite obviously. And of course, during the Second World War, mediums were functioning very much and providing information. Helen Duncan was prosecuted in order to stop her giving out information about ships that had gone down when the War Office were keeping back that information. So they prosecuted her to shut her up because she was simply giving families messages from their boys who were on those ships. And yet, as far as the government was concerned, those ships were still afloat. So mediums have been persecuted and prosecuted for what is telling the truth, just for giving these messages. But there was still no organisation. But there was a lady called Emma Hardinge Britton, who was actually born in London, in Stepney, and she was an opera singer. And singing took her back to the United States of America, which is where we sort of began. And there she had a sitting with a medium and was well impressed with her evidence and developed her own mediumship and became a very famous speaker and orator who travelled the world. And she came to this country, she married Dr. Britton and became Emma Hardinge Britton. And in this country she saw there was a need to bring spiritualists together. So in Manchester she decided to call a group of people together, anyone who was interested, people who'd set up their own little churches. In 1890 she called a meeting and a federation was set up, which was the start of the religion of spiritualism, starting to just bring it together. And because the churches that were being used were often owned by individuals, and when the people passed to the spirit world, the family just took the churches because there was nothing to keep them secure. So in 1901, a trust corporation was set up, and that was the Spiritualist National Union, so that property could be placed in trust, and therefore it would, for eternity, infinity, as long as it stood, remain a church for the people that followed, that could have that church secure for them. And in 1902, everything from the Federation was transferred to the Spiritualist National Union, the new trust company, trust corporation. And in order to define spiritualism within the memorandum of this limited company, the principles were brought into being. Emma had originally put together 5 principles through her mediumship and through being inspired by Robert Owen. Not necessarily all through her mediumship, she listened to his talks and was inspired by them, and eventually put together the 5 principles, which when the memorandum was put together were made 7, to define spiritualism and spiritualist. It had to have a definition. So within the memorandum of association is situated the 7 principles of spiritualism. And so really that's where it began. But when was it accepted as a religion within this country? When it was acknowledged? 1939. In 1939, the Home Office recognised it as a religion, as a body for appointing ministers. So in 1939, it became publicly recognised and acknowledged, and its ministers are registered with the Home Office like any other minister to sign your passports if anybody needs them doing. I'm available after the lecture just to do all the things that any other minister can do. So it is a recognised religion in the United Kingdom, not so much in other countries. Certainly in Australia it is, and Canada and parts of America, but not everywhere, of course. But if we look up spiritualism on the internet, which is where everybody looks these days, but they don't use a dictionary anymore, look up, you will find, if you look at the BBC website, it says something like, spiritualists communicate with the spirits of people who have physically died. Spiritualists are those who believe in a continued future existence and that people who have passed on into the spirit world can and do communicate with us. That's taken from the BBC website. No mention of the religion of spiritualism, none at all, nor what is it based on. And I think one of the reasons that perhaps we've allowed that to happen is it's being traditional to say that the key principle of spiritualism is the third principle, and that is the communication of spirits, the communion of spirits. We've focused on that, so we've handed it over to that aspect. But if that was the prime objective, why wasn't it number one principle? It's a good question, isn't it? Number one principle is the fatherhood of God, and that follows by the brotherhood of man. And then we have the communion of spirits and the ministry of angels. So therefore, somehow or other, I believe that we've gone the same way as America. Now, for over the last 40, 50 years, America have been desperate to get English mediums back over there because they'd lost their way. They'd lost the essence of what came there. And I believe that we've been allowing it to go the same way. And there comes a time when we have to decide, are we a psychic club, are we a psychic association, or are we a religion? And our churches have to recognise that. Because if you said to our churches, you can do a service without messages, they would be horrified. Nobody would come. I think that's wrong. I think people would come. Because many people who don't come, because they don't want to talk to the dead, would come for our belief, our philosophy, what we have to say. If we're not careful, we'll be accused of being a religion of the past and the future. Because we communicate with people who have passed and we promise a future existence. But what do we do now? What do we give out in our churches that will help people now in their lives? And that is the religion of spiritualism. Talking about the power of spirit, the God force in our lives. And how that makes a difference. How it changes how we live our lives. When I was ordained as a minister in 1992, the gentleman who took that service, the picture is up there, chose to read this reading to me at my service. And it's taken from his book, He's Still Cool. It wasn't what he'd chosen originally. He said he was told overnight to change it and to read this. It's called Invincibility. The spirit is invincible, unconquerable, free, to rise above all earthly cares and pains. When we worship God in true love and constancy, there's no place in our hearts for worldly chains. Such cares of mortal life will be dissolved, because in us they truly have no part. We'll give them to the Father and know they'll be resolved. They're but life's test to see how pure the heart. In the presence of God's Spirit, we're filled with peace and love. Our consciousness is raised above this plane. Nothing then can hurt us when we lift ourselves above. We're invincible. The Spirit can't be slain. So if I said to you, the first principle is the fatherhood of God, You have that God force within you. It is the creative power of life. Nothing lives without it. So you are invincible. How does that make you feel? Nothing? Powerful. Would it change your approach to life?
Yes. Hope so.
Anybody else feel like that?
Wasn't then there'd be no point in trying.
I can't quite hear what you said.
I said if we didn't know that we went on to something else, there'd be no point in trying in this life, would there?
It's true, but it's not just about that future life, it's about now. We are in that existence now. We talk about compensation and retribution hereafter. So everybody thinks that's hereafter death. It's not, it's hereafter now.
When we do
Now.
to that God power, it does change.
Yes, it does. And that is the message of spiritualism that's missing. That's missing. That if we know we are of God, that invincible power, because we are energy, and scientists tell us that energy cannot be destroyed. It can only change its form. And so the minute we know that, it changes your whole approach to life. And that reading on my ordination day changed my life. I will never forget my ordination. It was the power that touched me on that occasion as that was read to me. Because I'd been a person who'd always been very sort of concerned about pleasing other people, what other people thought, what were their opinions. I had a very dominant mother who was my only object in life was to please her. And suddenly I realised that that wasn't what life was all about. That something was very different. That this power that I'd always known I had from being a tiny child, when the Sunday school teacher asked me, where is God? I can't remember what we were supposed to say. We were drawing some pictures. And I said, God is in my head, he talks to me. Don't ask me why I said it was God. I don't know. But I heard voices. And as I wasn't born into a spiritualist family, I had a Church of England father, a Methodist mother, and a Catholic lodger. So I didn't stand very much chance of being understood as a mediumistic child, did I? But I said it. The deaconess who ran the Sunday school never asked me a question again. And so we somehow or other have lost this message. And I said it yesterday in the Philosophy of Spirit tutorial that I did. What we know is that spirit power is creative. How many of you do absent healing? So what do you use to do that? Spirit power. Yes, is that not so?
Yes.
You address it through your mind, ask for healing. Okay. So therefore, it works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We know it does. I'm testimony to it, definitely. So that same creative power works all the time. We don't just switch it on when we do healing and switch it off when we're finished. Because it's there all the time. Every thought we have initiates it and creates something. How much more powerful are we than when we're angry? Just imagine what sort of creation we're making when we're angry, because it's still working. But let's just say, if we use it for absent healing, why can't we use it for other things? Why can't we create changes in other ways? Do you know what I did the other week? I sent thoughts to Putin. I sent creative thoughts to Putin to stop doing what he's doing. I don't know if it did any good, but I felt good doing it. Why can't we do that? Why can't we change the world? I want to read something to you, if I may. It was written by Maurice Barbanel, the editor of the Psychic News and the medium for Silver Birch. And he wrote in a leaflet called Implications of Spiritualism. All religions are founded on the fact that there is something in man which defies death and survives. You are spirit. You survive death. Because you are spirit, you are alive today. The spirit within you, which causes you to live, is the same spirit that animates every member of every nation, of every race, and of every colour. Spiritually, the people of the world are one. God has made us all members of one vast spiritual family. When that fact is understood and applied in human, national, and international life, war will be driven from the face of the earth. Man will have learned not to kill his brothers. Properly understood, spiritualism will become one of the greatest forces for good in the world. When its truths have spread far and wide, and the majority of people accept its teachings and regulate their lives accordingly, a new era will dawn for humanity. How would you like to be part of that new era? And we can. Because if we can start using the power of spirit, and I said yesterday, I started a new society. Anybody who wants to join can join for free. And it's called Spirit in Action. The God Force in Action. And all I ask of those of you who want to join is that maybe you give 10 minutes of your day to do some positive work with your creative power. Whatever you choose to do with it, do it. Make it happen. Because you are the only way that power can function on the earth. I will never pray to God to make peace. It's our job. We made the wars. It's up to us. We are here to learn from this experience. God provides us with the ability to make peace. But men upon the earth, mostly today, don't want to do that. But we can change them. We can. And you might think that just one person, I can't change it. I can't do it. So let's imagine for a moment that this room was in complete and absolute blackout. And one of you had the courage to strike a match. What would happen? There would be light. I challenge any of you now to extinguish all the light in this room. Nobody want to volunteer? Why not? Because you can't. You can't. Darkness cannot extinguish light. Only we can do that by switching it off. But we can't extinguish light. But we can change and extinguish darkness and put light into it. Do you like that idea? And how can we put light into it? By the light of our soul. The Spirit will tell us they see us by our light. The light that is the Spirit within us, our soul. So if we take our soul out into the world and let its light shine, because we know that we are invincible, we can go anywhere. Emma Hardinge Britton did that. She went wherever she was called. A woman travelling on her own in a time when it was not done. When she had rotten fruit pelted at her as she went to take a trance lecture. She went to societies where there were men in charge, and she said, you name the subject and I will lecture on it. Anything under the sun. And she stood and did that. Any model subject that they threw at her, through the power of the Spirit, she lectured on it. That's the power of Spirit in action. And she went wherever she was called, despite whatever happened to her. She ended up on a station once. She was put off the train at a station, and when the train pulled away, the station was in total blackness, and there was nobody there. And there was just her trunk and her. And she waited, and she sent out to talk to the spirit world and said, what's going to happen? And after a little while, she heard a horse and trap. Clippy-clop, clippy-clop. You like the sound effects? They're not very accurate, but there you go. And the man called out, is anybody there? Well, it's Typical for a spiritualist, isn't it? Is anybody there? And she said yes, and he said, I've come to pick you up. And she didn't have a clue who he was. But she got in the trap and he put a trunk up there. And he took her to his house, a simple peasant man, gave her a bed for the night. And they never asked each other, this is the incredible thing, you know, till the next morning. They were so tired. The next morning she said, why did you come out? And he said, I was woken in the night and told to come and get you. So I put the horse to the trap and I came. And it turned out that the man who had asked for her to come to lecture there was his boss. But this man was a medium. And he'd been woken in the night to come to the station to pick her up and take her home and give her a bed for the night. Emma had one word that ruled her life. Trust. Trust in the power of the Spirit, because she knew she was invincible, that no one could ever destroy her. That's one amazing power, isn't it? But we have that same power. We have that same ability to change things. So the word religion comes from the Latin base religare, which means to bind together. But it's not really done very much good in that department, I think, that we can accept. It's just not happened. So let's try to look at another word, the ISM bit, the ism, spiritualism. The suffix ism denotes a distinctive system or belief or doctrine that guides a social movement or group. So I guess, yes, we could say we are an ism, because we do have a system of beliefs, not exactly a doctrine, but a distinctive system. But I just think that it's still not quite right. I'm not sure that ism suffix is quite right for us. So I like to think, for me, that spiritualism means spiritual inside me. That's my ism. That power of spirit inside me. Except it's not quite inside me, because I also believe the body is in the soul, not the other way around. So I want to ask you, how many of you believe you are spirit now? I don't. I know I am. And that is different. I was brought up to say, I believe in God the Father, learn the creeds. I don't say that now. I know I am spirit. I trust that, like Emma. I know I am invincible. And there are things that we know, and we kind of take for granted, and I think this is what's happened to the God force and spiritualism. Do you ever go to bed at night and pray that the sun will rise in the morning? Anybody do that? Why not? Because you know it will. And when it happens, is there any fanfare of trumpets? Is there any loud announcement? No. It's absolutely silent. Apart from its beauty, if you happen to be up that early, nobody takes any notice of it anymore. And yet, without that sun being exactly the distance from this earth, or the earth being exactly that distance from the sun, we would not exist as physical beings, would we? No. It's the power that keeps us alive as physical beings, and yet we simply take it for granted. And I believe that's what's happened to the God force in our world. We take it for granted. We pray, please God do this, please God make that, please God do this. When in fact, He's given us the power to do it. Because that's how it works. We are here, we chose to come here to learn, to experience in this world, and to learn and to use our power. And so it's through us, we are the transformers for that power. We bring it into the world. All those of you who act as healers, you are bringing that world that power into the world. You are the transformer for it. You are the go-between. From spirit, through spirit, to spirit. Isn't that what we say about healing? So was it any different in any other situation? From spirit, through spirit, to spirit. The Lyceum Manual was written many years ago, long before SMU Spiritualism came into being. And there is a paragraph in the Lyceum Manual that says, the aim of Spiritualism is to effect a complete at-one-ment and unison of man with God, until every action and thought of man is in perfect harmony with divine will. How do you feel about that? Do you talk? Have you lost your voices? How do you feel about that statement? Good. That was written.
It would be nice if it was true.
Yes. And that we could make it too. We could, if we allow that power to guide us, to guide our thoughts, our words, our deeds, we would be at one, well, a little bit more at one, gradually, with the divine will. It's worth thinking about. So the primary element of religion is the first principle, the fatherhood of God. And we've lost that. We've focused on the third principle. Through the fatherhood of God, we have the creative essence, the God force. Not when we die, but now, right now. Back to my favourite quotation from the Lyceum Manual. I've already said it once today, maybe more than once, because I say it a lot. All are but parts of one stupendous whole, whose body nature is, and God the soul. How does that make you feel? It makes me feel tingle. All are but parts of one stupendous whole, whose body nature is, and God the soul. Like it?
Yes.
I love it. Guess what it comes from in the Lyceum Manual? A piece called Natural Worship. Natural worship. Some years ago, right in this room, I ran a course called Living with the Power of Spirit. We ran it, Glyn Edwards and I, together for a few years. Then it was dropped out of the curriculum because everybody wanted mediumship. And it was teaching people what I'm talking to you about. That you are living with the power of Spirit and how it can make a difference. How it can heal you, how it can do self-healing, how it can do all kinds of things. And this lady who came on the course, as you know, spiritualists always have a raffle every day, you know. Very rare we don't have a raffle. The only time we don't have a raffle, I think, is at ordinations, and that's a miracle. So, well, it is. So at the end of the week, she won a prize in the raffle, and it was a huge vase this size. And she'd come on the train, and she put, when she was taking this vase home, she packed it in a case with all the clothes around it. And off she went on a journey, and she had to go to London and change in London for a train. And I never thought any more about the lady, other than she'd be a very nice lady. So she wrote to me. And she said when she got to London, she was sat in the British Rail Cafe and she had to walk with her case. I thought she was a brave woman to be sitting in the British Rail Cafe for a start. But she had to walk from there a long way to where her next train was. And she thought, oh, how am I going to get this vase home? So she said, I thought to myself, I got the letter, I'm going to do what Judith said. And what we'd said was, just try it out. One morning, perhaps a rainy morning, if you wish, would do. And just feel your power. Let your light shine. Just really work on it, feel it. Let it expand. Recognise that you are this light, this invincible power. And just walk down the street. You don't need to speak to anybody. You don't even need to smile at anybody, and see what happens. People will look at you and they'll smile at you and they'll speak to you because they're touched at some level by your power. It works. So she decided she'd try it out. So off she went. She worked on this, thinking about her power, and she picked up her case and off she went. And she said, Judith, 6 people offered to carry my suitcase. She said it had never, and she said no every time because she wanted to test her. She said it had never ever happened before. 6 people offered to carry a suitcase on her way to the train. So she said, Judith, I only have 2 words to say to you. It works, and I will live my life according to what we've done this week. I will make a difference. So it doesn't need to be loud. Is there any noise when the sun rises? It just needs to be quietly powerful and flow out through you. And when you are living your life in that way, you can call yourself a spiritualist. Because that's the essence of spiritualism. When you can utilize that, even if it's only for 5 minutes a day, you are living the true philosophy of spirit. The power and the light and the love and the creativity that God gives each of us. It's our gift, our present. He gives us 2 presents. He gives us the gift of life with this power, and He gives us the present now. And as long as it takes me to say now, it's gone. You can't have it back again. We could all come and sit in this room again, and I could try and say the same words, though I wouldn't be able to. But it wouldn't be the same moment, would it? So every time we waste a now, we've wasted one of God's presents. That's a tough task, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because to try and do this in every moment of every day would be really hard. But some people have achieved it, I believe, or perhaps close to it. I certainly haven't. But I try. I try. And it's given me a better quality of life, without question. When I had a tumour removed from my spinal cord in December 2012, urgently, it was done on the 20th of December, so urgently, the hospital told me I was a miracle. They had never seen anybody recover from that surgery like I did. I was amazing. You are our little star. The words they used, I recall them. Guess what I told them? It was the power of the Spirit. Spiritual healing. The morning after the op, I said, I want to get out of bed. I don't want a bed plan. Well, you can't. It's not 12 hours since you had your surgery. So I want to get out of bed. And when I tried, the left leg wouldn't work because they did tell me I could be paralysed. I still got out of bed. And 4 days later, they let me go home. At 12 weeks, the consultant said to me, you are more like 12 months than 12 weeks. A wound that was meant to weep because they'd opened up the sheath around the spinal cord, no weeping. Nothing. I stopped taking painkillers because they were addictive and they were giving me side effects. Yes, I had pain, but the healing brought me through it. True.
Absolutely true, yeah.
And as I share that with you, I had to stop for a moment because I'm so emotional and grateful and moved by what they did for me in those days. Because I was more afraid of waking up paralysed than not waking up. I didn't know what I would face. But, just like a book that I read recently by a lady called Anita Mojani, Ariane has it now, who was dying of cancer throughout her body, and her organs were closing down, and she was in the hospital and they said she's dying, and her family was there, and she died. And she had a death experience, not a near death, a death experience. The spirit world told her she had to go back. She had a job to do. She had to go tell her experience. And when she came back to life, which she did, they were amazed, all the cancer had gone from her body. Every bit. How's that? And now she's telling it through her book around the world.
Wonderful.
The power of the Spirit. Do you think it's wonderful? It's a real story. It's not a made-up story. It's real. The book's there. It's called Dying to Be Me by Anita Morjani, if you want to read it. Marianne has it at the moment. So this power is real, and it's what spiritualism is all about. It's what we're all about. And we need to put it out there, because I believe there are millions of people out there who would come to spiritualism for the understanding of that power, who wouldn't necessarily want to talk to a dead person. Do you agree?
Just been saying that over the last few months. Why do we have to have all the messages all the while? That's not what we go to church for.
Absolutely. Spiritualism is a living religion receiving continuous revelation from the spirit world all the time. When the events of Hydesville took place, Andrew Jackson Davis, a wonderful medium long before Hydesville, a different kind of medium, he just sat at his breakfast table and stopped, and he said, "It has begun. A living experience is born." And that was the day, Hydesville Day. But that living experience, in my opinion, has been downgraded. Dumbed down, I think was what they'd say. That was an amazing statement for him to make. It has begun. A living experience is born. Every day is a living experience, and we need to focus on what we can do with God's precious present. That's what the religion of philosophy of spiritualism is about. Today we have a choice, and we need to choose a clear path to demonstrate just who we are and what we stand for. We can become a psychic club, and that's what's happening. And so many of you see it in pubs and clubs around you. Messages, mediumship. But that's not what spiritualism is about. Yes, we communicate. Yes, we provide that evidence. But it's a means to an end, not an end in itself. And there are many other roads to Rome. Many people come into our churches because they're grieving, but many others come because they're looking for something. And that something is missing in most of our churches today. And I'm sad to say that, because it didn't used to be. When we had those trans speakers who were inspired by the spirit world, we have the pure voice of the Spirit coming through. And the same things happened as happened at the Council of Nicaea all those years ago. The voice of the Spirit has been shut down. And we're just not hearing that continuous revelation to drive us forward, to let us put out there the message to the world that spiritualism can change the world like Barbie said it could, if we live with its power in our lives. Just one tiny bit more than we did yesterday. Every day that we do a bit with that power within ourselves makes a difference. Like striking a match in a black room. In the old-fashioned light bulbs, we used to have a little filament that went across, and if it broke, there was no light, was there?
No.
Can you remember those kind of, before we had all these low energy and all the rest of it? And I used to think, how amazing, because coming from the power station, the strength of that power is incredible, isn't it? But it gradually gets transformed down and down through the wires, into the house, into the room, down and down until it comes to the lamp fitter. But all that power is no good till somebody switches the light on. And that tiny filament that ran from one side of the bulb to the other brought light into the room, enabled that great power to bring light into our lives. I want to be a small filament. I am a small filament But imagine if we all switched on our small filament, what a difference it would make in the world. Because like I said, we are the transformers. Every day I do self-healing to my body. Because I was born with lots of problems, and believe me, I've had a lot of problems with my body. Every day I do self-healing. And that's not asking the spirit world for healing. That's not the same thing. I get that as well. But I use my power to heal myself every day. My spirit power. Because it flows through every cell of my body. Every cell of our body has an intelligence, a creative. It can renew itself, can't it? Wounds heal. It's intelligent. It knows how to do it. All I have to do is focus on it and give it permission. And let it do its own work. I'll tell you briefly a really funny story. Many years ago, I was woken up in the night and I could feel a presence around the bed. And I could feel something here in my groin, and it was like hands working. I was born with an arterial venous malformation from here right down. You can see it there. Which means the arteries and the veins are all mangled and they don't really know where it goes. And it grows pockets of blood. And it can become a terminal disease in some cases. And I was having a lot of problems just behind the knee with it. There was a big pocket of blood. And I woke up and I thought, wow, this is incredible. So I could feel them working. And of course, in my stupidity, I said, but you're in the wrong place. The problem's behind the knee, not in the groin. And I'm thinking, why are they there? What are they doing? And then afterwards, as it faded and stopped, I thought, you stupid woman. They know better than you. Were you trying to tell them where to go? So anyway, I went back to sleep. Next morning, phone rang. Side of bed, pick it up, Mavis Patel. Judith, Mika-san told me to phone you. Mika-san is one of her guides. She said, he told me to tell you that last night they did a spirit operation on you. I said, yes, I know. She said, yes, but there's more. They told me to tell you that the problem is not behind the knee, it's in the groin. So what I say to you is, don't tell this power what to do. It knows. It knows where the problem, where the imbalance is in your body, because it's the controlling factor in your body. It's what gives it life. Just let it flow through. Let it do its work. Trust it. That it is the most intellectual power you have, because it's the God force. And it's the essence of the religion of spiritualism. Just imagine if we could get that message out into the world. Could we make a difference? Yes, do you think?
Yes.
So, are you going to join Spirit in Action?
Oh, yes.
That wasn't very strong. You already joined. Did you join yesterday?
No, we were
Oh, this morning,
this morning.
in the prayer thing that we did this
Yeah.
morning. I talked about it yesterday in my Philosophy of Spirit group. Because Spirit in Action is how we can truly put spiritualism on the map and show the world that we are truly working the God force. And we can build peace, which is our theme for the moment. This honouring of the 100 years since the war, the First World War. Yes, we remember the people who give their lives, but what we want to do is try to make sure there'll be no more by focusing on peace. And we go to the Arboretum and we honour those who've lost their life, but we do our peace walk. We walk through the grounds of the Arboretum carrying white flowers to our memorial, and there we honour peace in our world. And in doing that, we are sending out our thoughts into the world to make peace. I just wonder if Mr. Putin felt me. I don't know, but I don't care. I gave it a go. And it did something, I know that. I trust that. Whether it made any difference or not, I don't know. I sent it to all the politicians there, but I focused on him because he's the one who holds the power strings. We know that. And I just felt good that I was doing it to try and help people's lives that were being destroyed there, who had done nothing to deserve it. And like I said, if we focus on one tiny bit, it's more powerful. You know, like the rain comes down, but if we see it coming down the spout, it's much more powerful. So if we can try and focus on one bit, we can be more powerful. So this is a message of the religion of spiritualism that the spirit world brought through Emma, through many others, and we've let it get diluted. If you can bring it back, be proud. Know you are invincible. Know you are a power. Know you are of God. And let everybody else just know it. You don't have to shout about it. The song doesn't. Just know it and let it be in your life. And you will then be a spiritualist.